I'm Bryn Hollings, 32, and I've built a career uncovering the financial lies of millionaires while living in a glass house of my own. My life has always been defined by precision. As a forensic accountant, I don't deal in gray areas. I deal in hard numbers, paper trails, and the absolute certainty that everyone has something to hide. I track hidden assets for divorce attorneys and expose embezzlement schemes for Fortune 500 companies. I am the woman you call when the math doesn't add up. Yet, as I sat in the driver's seat of my idling SUV that Tuesday morning, gripping a travel mug of black coffee, I realized I had been the blindest person in the room. The morning sun was cutting through the maple trees in our driveway, casting long, fractured shadows across the dashboard. Julian was standing by my window. He looked perfect. He always did. He was wearing that charcoal suit I bought him for our anniversary, the one that made his shoulders look broad and capable. He leaned through the open window, the scent of expensive sandalwood and freshly pressed cotton filling the cabin. "I'll be back Thursday," he said, his smile tight but warm. "Don't wait up for me tonight. The Chicago clients are demanding." "Drive safe," I said, leaning up to kiss him. "Call me when you land." "Always," he promised. He pulled back, tapped the roof of my car twice, a habit he'd had since we were dating, and turned to walk toward his sedan parked about 20 feet away. I watched him go. I admired him. I loved him. I shifted my car into reverse, ready to back out and head to my firm, but then the infotainment screen on my dashboard flickered. The music cut out. The screen went black for a split second before flashing a familiar name, Julian's iPhone. I frowned. He must have paired his phone to my car when he drove it to the car wash yesterday. The Bluetooth range was strong, clinging to the connection even as he walked away from me. I reached out to tap the disconnect button, not wanting to interrupt whatever podcast or call he was about to start. My finger hovered over the screen. I heard the sound first. It wasn't music. It was the sharp, amplified rustle of fabric against a microphone. His phone was in his pocket. Then came the crunch of his leather dress shoes on the gravel driveway. I should have disconnected. I should have just severed the link and driven to work. But my professional instinct, that nagging little voice that tells me when a ledger doesn't balance, made me freeze. He was dialing someone. The ringing sound boomed through my car's premium speakers surrounding me. One ring, two. "Yeah," Julian's voice said. It sounded different through the speakers, deeper, stripped of the warmth he had just shown me. It was a flat, business-like tone I rarely heard. I looked through the windshield. I could see his back. He was opening the trunk of his car. "I'm leaving now," Julian said. "The wife is heading to the office." My stomach dropped. The wife, not Bryn, not his partner, the wife. An obstacle. A pause of silence filled my car, thick and suffocating. Then a second voice answered. It was distorted, crackling slightly over the connection, but it was distinct enough to make the fine hairs on my arms stand straight up. It was a man's voice, cold, metallic, and utterly devoid of humanity. "Good," the voice said. "Is the body gone yet?" My breath hitched in my throat. The coffee mug slipped from my hand, landing with a dull thud on the passenger seat, but I didn't look at it. I couldn't move. My eyes were locked on my husband, who was standing in the bright morning sunlight of our suburban driveway, casually tossing his briefcase into the trunk. Body. My brain scrambled for a rational explanation. In my line of work, body could mean a corporate entity, a body of work, a legislative body. I tried to force the word into a harmless context, tried to use logic to pave over the sudden, violent spike of adrenaline flooding my veins. Julian didn't hesitate. "It's in the trunk," Julian replied, his voice echoing through my car, vibrating against my rib cage. I wrapped it in the tarp like you said. I'm handling disposal now. I'll be at the quarry in 40 minutes. The world tilted on its axis. Disposal, quarry, tarp. There was no metaphor here. There was no corporate slang. I watched paralyzed as Julian slammed his trunk shut. The sound was muffled through the glass of my car, but the thump reverberated through the speakers like a gunshot. He walked around to the driver's side of his sedan, his face impassive, looking like the same man who had just kissed me. The same man who rubbed my feet when I was tired. The same man who was currently discussing the disposal of a human corpse. "Don't screw this up, Julian," the cold voice hissed. "If they find it, we're both dead." "Relax," Julian said, opening his car door. "I've never let you down before." He slid into his seat. As he started his engine, the Bluetooth connection in my car finally sputtered. The distance became too great. The audio crackled, popped, and then cut to dead silence. The screen reverted to my calm, innocuous playlist. I sat there, my foot pressing the brake pedal so hard my leg began to tremble. My heart was hammering against my sternum, a frantic, caged rhythm that made my vision blur. I watched Julian's sedan back out of the driveway, turn smoothly onto the street, and accelerate away toward the highway. He wasn't going to Chicago. He was going to a quarry. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking violently. I was the woman who found the secrets. I was the hunter. But as I watched the empty street where my husband had just vanished, I realized with terrifying clarity that I had been sleeping next to a monster. And now I was the only person on earth who knew what was in his trunk. I froze in the driver's seat, my hand hovering over the ignition as the audio streamed through my car speakers. Julian's voice, usually warm and melodic, sounded like jagged glass as he replied, "It's handled, but the cleanup is going to cost us more than we planned." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I watched him through the rearview mirror. He wasn't alone in the driveway anymore. Mrs. Gable, our 70-year-old neighbor with the prize-winning hydrangeas, was walking her golden retriever past the end of our lawn. She paused, offering a cheerful, unsuspecting wave in Julian's direction. I stopped breathing. The oxygen in the car felt suddenly thin, siphoned away by the sheer horror of the moment. I watched my husband, the man who flossed religiously and separated our recycling, lift his hand. He waved back. He smiled. It was a dazzling smile. It was the same smile he gave me across the aisle on our wedding day. It was the same smile he used to charm waitresses and disarm clients. He projected the image of the perfect suburban gentleman, greeting a neighbor on a sunny Tuesday morning, all while discussing the financial logistics of a murder on a live line. "Don't worry about the money," the other voice on the line growled, the sound vibrating through the leather of my seat. "Just make sure there isn't a single fiber left behind." "I don't pay you for mistakes, Julian." "I don't make mistakes," Julian said. He turned back to the car, his smile vanishing instantly, replaced by a cold, predatory focus that made him look like a stranger. He slid into the driver's seat of his sedan. "I'm losing signal," Julian said, his voice clipping. "I'll update you when the package is submerged." Submerged. My stomach lurched violently. Acid climbed up my throat, burning and bitter. I clapped a hand over my mouth, fighting the urge to vomit all over the pristine dashboard. The Bluetooth connection finally faltered as his engine roared to life. The audio crackled, a burst of static noise that sounded like gunfire, and then the screen went black before reverting to my harmless acoustic playlist. Silence rushed back into the car, but it was heavy now. Oppressive. I watched his sedan back out of the driveway. He moved with efficient, practiced speed. There was no hesitation in his driving, no erratic swerving of a guilty conscience. He drove like a man on a mission. He turned left at the stop sign, heading toward the interstate ramp that led out of town, toward the old rock quarries that had been abandoned in the 90s. I looked down at my hands. They were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned the color of old bone. I was shaking. It wasn't a subtle tremble. It was a violent, full-body quake that rattled my teeth. He has a body in the trunk. My forensic accountant brain, usually my greatest asset, began to misfire. It tried to categorize the data. Fact, Julian lied about his location. Fact, Julian is in possession of a corpse. Fact, Julian is working for someone else. I looked at the house, our beautiful, modern, glass-fronted home. It suddenly looked like a stage set, a prop. How much of our life was real? The vacations to Cabo, the late nights at the office. The way he held me when I lost my mother, was any of it real or was it all just cover for this? I couldn't just sit here. If I went to the police now, what did I have? A snippet of overheard audio? A suspicion? He was a lawyer. He knew how to dismantle an accusation. Without the body, without the phone, it was my word against his, and Julian Hollings was a pillar of the community. He was the man who organized the charity 5K. I was just the stressed-out wife who worked too many hours. I needed proof, hard, irrefutable evidence. The kind that stands up in court. The kind that doesn't rely on hearsay. I looked at the dashboard clock. 8:14 a.m. He said he was going to the quarry. That was 40 minutes away. My eyes snapped to the passenger seat where his iPad usually sat, but it was gone. He'd taken it. However, I knew something he didn't. I knew that Julian, despite his meticulous nature, was lazy about his digital hygiene. We shared an iCloud family plan. He usually turned off location sharing on his phone when he went on client trips, claiming it saved battery, but he often forgot to disable it on his secondary devices, like his Apple Watch. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slipping over the screen as I unlocked it. I tapped the Find My app. The map loaded, the little radar circles pulsing. Julian's iPhone, location not found. My heart sank. Of course, I scrolled down. Julian's Apple Watch Series 8. The pin dropped. It wasn't moving. It was sitting stationary right here at the house. I stared at the screen, confused. Then I looked up through the windshield. There on the porch railing where he had been drinking his coffee earlier sat his watch. He had taken it off to load the trunk. He had forgotten it. A surge of adrenaline, sharper and hotter than the fear, flooded my system. That watch tracked his heart rate. It tracked his steps. But more importantly, if he had it synced to his phone, it might have cached his recent messages or call logs before the Bluetooth range broke. I threw the car door open and stumbled out onto the gravel. My legs felt like rubber, but I forced them to move. I ran up the driveway, my heels clicking frantically against the pavement. I grabbed the watch from the railing. The screen was dark. I tapped it. Passcode required. I froze. Julian never used a passcode on his watch before. He must have added it recently. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. I tried the last 4 digits of his social. Incorrect. Think, Bryn, think, I whispered, my voice sounding shrill in the quiet morning air. You uncover hidden assets for a living. You find the numbers people try to bury. What number would a narcissist use? I looked at the watch face. 8:16 a.m. He was getting further away every second. Then I remembered. The day he made partner at his firm, he called it the day his life truly began. April 12th, I typed in 0412. The little lock icon clicked open. I didn't exhale. I swiped immediately to the Messages app. It was empty, deleted, of course. I swiped to the recent calls, also cleared. Damn it, I hissed, gripping the watch tight enough to crack the screen. But then, a notification pinged at the top of the tiny display. It was a calendar reminder set for 15 minutes ago. Drop off, Sector 4. Confirm payment receipt. It wasn't a location, it was a note, but below it there was an attachment, a voice memo. I tapped play. The volume was low, tinny coming from the small speaker, but the voice was unmistakable. It wasn't Julian, it was the other man, the cold voice from the car. Instructions for the drop, the voice rasped. Enter via the north gate. The lock code is 7793. Do not use the main road. And Julian, if you check the bank account, you'll see the first half of the 5 million has cleared. You're a rich man now, don't be a dead one. $5 million, the world spun. My husband wasn't just cleaning up a mess. He was a hitman or a fixer. A $5 million fixer. I stood on my front porch, clutching the watch, realizing that the man I slept next to was worth more dead than alive to the people he was working for. And if he came back and realized I had this watch? I looked at my SUV. I looked at the empty street. I couldn't stay here, he would be back, and when he came back, he would realize the watch was missing. I ran back to my car, threw the watch into the passenger seat, and slammed the door. I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. I was going to follow the money. Because numbers don't lie, and $5 million leaves a trail that even a murderer can't completely hide. I threw the car into drive. I wasn't Bryn the wife anymore. I was Bryn the auditor. And I was about to conduct the most dangerous audit of my life. I'm Bryn Calloway, a 32-year-old forensic accountant who specializes in uncovering hidden assets for high-net-worth divorces. And I just realized my entire marriage is a money laundering scheme for a hitman. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I watched him through the rearview mirror. He wasn't alone in the driveway anymore. Mrs. Gable, our 70-year-old neighbor with the prize-winning hydrangeas, was walking her golden retriever past the end of our lawn. She paused, offering a cheerful, unsuspecting wave in Julian's direction. I stopped breathing. The oxygen in the car felt suddenly thin, siphoned away by the sheer horror of the moment. I watched my husband, the man who flossed religiously and separated our recycling, lift his hand. He waved back. He smiled. It was a dazzling smile. It was the same smile he gave me across the aisle on our wedding day. It was the same smile he used to charm waitresses and disarm clients. He projected the image of the perfect suburban gentleman, greeting a neighbor on a sunny Tuesday morning, all while discussing the financial logistics of a murder on a live line. Don't worry about the money, the other voice on the line growled, the sound vibrating through the leather of my seat. Just make sure there isn't a single fiber left behind. I don't pay you for mistakes, Julian. I don't make mistakes, Julian said. He turned back to the car, his smile vanishing instantly, replaced by a cold, predatory focus that made him look like a stranger. He slid into the driver's seat of his sedan. I'm losing signal, Julian said, his voice clipping. I'll update you when the package is submerged. Submerged. My stomach lurched violently. Acid climbed up my throat, burning and bitter. I clapped a hand over my mouth, fighting the urge to vomit all over the pristine dashboard. The Bluetooth connection finally faltered as his engine roared to life. The audio crackled, a burst of static noise that sounded like gunfire, and then the screen went black before reverting to my harmless acoustic playlist. Silence rushed back into the car, but it was heavy now. Oppressive. I watched his sedan back out of the driveway. He moved with efficient, practiced speed. There was no hesitation in his driving, no erratic swerving of a guilty conscience. He drove like a man on a mission. He turned left at the stop sign, heading toward the interstate ramp that led out of town, toward the old rock quarries that had been abandoned in the 90s. I looked down at my hands. They were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned the color of old bone. I was shaking. It wasn't a subtle tremble. It was a violent, full-body quake that rattled my teeth. He has a body in the trunk. My forensic accountant brain, usually my greatest asset, began to misfire. It tried to categorize the data. Fact, Julian lied about his location. Fact, Julian is in possession of a corpse. Fact, Julian is working for someone else. I looked at the house, our beautiful, modern, glass-fronted home. It suddenly looked like a stage set, a prop. How much of our life was real? The vacations to Cabo, the late nights at the office. The way he held me when I lost my mother, was any of it real or was it all just cover for this? I couldn't just sit here. If I went to the police now, what did I have? A snippet of overheard audio? A suspicion? He was a lawyer. He knew how to dismantle an accusation. Without the body, without the phone, it was my word against his, and Julian Hollings was a pillar of the community. He was the man who organized the charity 5K. I was just the stressed-out wife who worked too many hours. I needed proof, hard, irrefutable evidence. The kind that stands up in court. The kind that doesn't rely on hearsay. I looked at the dashboard clock. 8:14 a.m. He said he was going to the quarry. That was 40 minutes away. My eyes snapped to the passenger seat where his iPad usually sat, but it was gone. He'd taken it. However, I knew something he didn't. I knew that Julian, despite his meticulous nature, was lazy about his digital hygiene. We shared an iCloud family plan. He usually turned off location sharing on his phone when he went on client trips, claiming it saved battery, but he often forgot to disable it on his secondary devices, like his Apple Watch. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slipping over the screen as I unlocked it. I tapped the Find My app. The map loaded, the little radar circles pulsing. Julian's iPhone, location not found. My heart sank. Of course, I scrolled down. Julian's Apple Watch Series 8. The pin dropped. It wasn't moving. It was sitting stationary right here at the house. I stared at the screen, confused. Then I looked up through the windshield. There on the porch railing where he had been drinking his coffee earlier sat his watch. He had taken it off to load the trunk. He had forgotten it. A surge of adrenaline, sharper and hotter than the fear, flooded my system. That watch tracked his heart rate. It tracked his steps. But more importantly, if he had it synced to his phone, it might have cached his recent messages or call logs before the Bluetooth range broke. I threw the car door open and stumbled out onto the gravel. My legs felt like rubber, but I forced them to move. I ran up the driveway, my heels clicking frantically against the pavement. I grabbed the watch from the railing. The screen was dark. I tapped it. Passcode required. I froze. Julian never used a passcode on his watch before. He must have added it recently. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. I tried the last 4 digits of his social. Incorrect. Think, Bryn, think, I whispered, my voice sounding shrill in the quiet morning air. You uncover hidden assets for a living. You find the numbers people try to bury. What number would a narcissist use? I looked at the watch face. 8:16 a.m. He was getting further away every second. Then I remembered. The day he made partner at his firm, he called it the day his life truly began. April 12th, I typed in 0412. The little lock icon clicked open. I didn't exhale. I swiped immediately to the Messages app. It was empty, deleted, of course. I swiped to the recent calls, also cleared. Damn it, I hissed, gripping the watch tight enough to crack the screen. But then, a notification pinged at the top of the tiny display. It was a calendar reminder set for 15 minutes ago. Drop off, Sector 4. Confirm payment receipt. It wasn't a location, it was a note, but below it there was an attachment, a voice memo. I tapped play. The volume was low, tinny coming from the small speaker, but the voice was unmistakable. It wasn't Julian, it was the other man, the cold voice from the car. Instructions for the drop, the voice rasped. Enter via the north gate. The lock code is 7793. Do not use the main road. And Julian, if you check the bank account, you'll see the first half of the 5 million has cleared. You're a rich man now, don't be a dead one. $5 million, the world spun. My husband wasn't just cleaning up a mess. He was a hitman or a fixer. A $5 million fixer. I stood on my front porch, clutching the watch, realizing that the man I slept next to was worth more dead than alive to the people he was working for. And if he came back and realized I had this watch? I looked at my SUV. I looked at the empty street. I couldn't stay here, he would be back, and when he came back, he would realize the watch was missing. I ran back to my car, threw the watch into the passenger seat, and slammed the door. I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. I was going to follow the money. Because numbers don't lie, and $5 million leaves a trail that even a murderer can't completely hide. I threw the car into drive. I wasn't Bryn the wife anymore. I was Bryn the auditor, and I was about to conduct the most dangerous audit of my life. I'm Bryn, 34 years old, and for the last decade I have built a career on the ruthless exposure of financial lies, but now I am the one living the biggest lie of all. The garage door opener groaned beneath the floorboards of the living room. It was a low, mechanical rumble that vibrated up through the soles of my feet. Usually that sound meant relief. It meant Julian was home. It meant wine on the patio and debriefing about our days and the comfort of another warm body in the house. Now it sounded like a warning siren. I stood in the center of our open-concept kitchen, gripping the edge of the quartz island until my fingertips turned white. I took a breath. I forced the air deep into my lungs, expanding my diaphragm, trying to slow the frantic jackhammering of my heart. 1, 2, 3. I checked my reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. My face looked pale, almost translucent under the recessed lighting. I pinched my cheeks hard, stinging the skin to force a flush of color to simulate the glow of a happy, unsuspecting wife. You are Bryn Hollings, I whispered to the empty room. You are tired from work, you missed your husband, you know nothing. I heard the heavy thud of the door connecting the garage to the mudroom. I heard the jingle of his keys hitting the catch-all bowl. Footsteps, confident, heavy strides. He wasn't sneaking around. Why would he? In his mind, he was the king of this castle, and I was just the clueless queen keeping the throne warm. Julian rounded the corner, his suit jacket slung casually over one shoulder, his top button undone. He looked devastatingly handsome. That was the sickest part of it all. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like the man who held my hair back when I had the flu, the man who surprised me with tickets to Italy. Hey, beautiful, he said, his voice warm and rich, wrapping around me like a blanket. I turned, I forced the corners of my mouth up. It felt like I was lifting weights with my facial muscles. You're back, I said. My voice didn't crack. Miracle number one. He dropped his jacket on a bar stool and crossed the distance between us in 2 strides. He wrapped his arms around my waist. I felt the heat of his body radiating through his dress shirt. It was a suffocating heat. I smelled him, a mix of his expensive sandalwood cologne, stale airplane air, and something else, something metallic. It was probably just my imagination, a phantom scent conjured by my terrified brain, but it smelled like old pennies. It smelled like blood. God, I missed you, he murmured against my neck. His lips brushed the sensitive skin below my ear. A violent wave of nausea rolled through my stomach. My throat constricted, fighting the urge to gag. I squeezed my eyes shut. I imagined a wall of ice between my skin and his lips. I missed you too, I lied. He pulled back, his hands resting heavily on my hips, his thumbs rubbing circles into the fabric of my dress. He looked into my eyes. I held his gaze. This was the test. Julian was a lawyer. He read people for a living. He dissected juries and witnesses for signs of deception. If I flinched, if I looked away, if my pupil dilated just a fraction too much, he would know. "You look tired," he said, his brow furrowing with concern. "Work brutal?" "End of quarter audits," I said, the excuse rolling off my tongue with practiced ease. "The Johnson file is a nightmare, hidden accounts everywhere." He laughed. The sound vibrated against my chest. "Well, you'll find them," he said, kissing my forehead. "You always do. Nothing stays hidden from you, Bryn." A chill sprinted down my spine. It felt like a threat, even though I knew he meant it as a compliment. "I made dinner," I said, pulling away from him, needing to break the physical contact before I started shaking. "Just pasta. I didn't have time for much else." "Pasta is perfect." We sat at the dining table 10 minutes later. The room was dim, lit only by the fixture above us, casting long shadows against the walls. I watched him eat. He ate with a precise, efficient hunger. He twirled the fettuccine around his fork, capturing every strand, never making a mess. I looked at his hands. They were large, capable hands with manicured nails and a platinum wedding band gleaming on the fourth finger. I thought about the audio recording I had heard on his watch 2 days ago. Make sure there isn't a single fiber left behind. I wondered what those hands had done in the last 48 hours. Had they held a gun? Had they strangled someone? Had they scrubbed a crime scene clean with the same meticulous attention to detail he used to fold his laundry? "So," he said, swallowing a bite and reaching for his wine glass, "did you do anything fun while I was gone, or just work?" The question hung in the air. I gripped my fork. I had spent the last 2 days downloading the contents of his Apple Watch, encrypting the files, and hiding a backup drive in a safety deposit box 3 towns over. I had spent the last 2 days researching the Cayman Island accounts I found linked to the shell company paying his consulting fees. "Just work," I said. "And I took Mrs. Gable some cookies. Her hydrangeas are blooming early." "That was nice of you," he said. "She's a sweet old lady." He took a sip of the Cabernet. The red liquid coated his lips. "She saw you leaving the other morning," I said. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. It was a risk. A massive, stupid risk. Julian froze. The glass hovered an inch from the table. He set it down slowly. "Did she?" he asked. His tone was casual, but his eyes sharpened. "I didn't think anyone was up that early." "She was walking the dog," I said, forcing myself to take a bite of pasta that tasted like ash. "She said you waved." "Right," he said, relaxing visibly. "I remember now, blue robe, golden retriever." He smiled at me. "I was in a rush to get to the airport, client emergency in Chicago, you know how it is." "I know," I said, silence stretched between us. It wasn't the comfortable silence of our marriage. It was a heavy, pressurized silence. It felt like the air inside a submarine before the hull breaches. I looked at the knife in his hand. He was cutting a piece of garlic bread. The serrated blade sawed through the crust. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound grated on my nerves like a dentist's drill. "You're not eating," he observed. "Stomach bug," I said. "Stress." "You work too hard, Bryn," he said softly. He reached across the table. My instinct was to recoil, to snatch my hand away. But I left it there on the cool wood of the table. He covered my hand with his. His palm was warm, his grip was firm. "We should go away," he said. "Just the two of us. Once this deal closes, we should take the boat out. Go somewhere where there's no cell service, no distractions." Panic flared in my chest, hot and bright. No cell service, just me, him, and the open ocean. It sounded like a disposal plan. Did he suspect? Did he know I had the watch? I had put it back on the porch railing exactly where I found it before he returned, but had I aligned it perfectly? That sounds lovely, I managed to say. Good, he said. He squeezed my hand. I'd be lost without you, Bryn, you know that, right? He stared at me, his blue eyes piercing, searching for something behind my mask. I know, I whispered. He released my hand and went back to his meal. I watched him chew. I watched him swallow. I realized then that the man I married was dead. He had died 2 days ago in the driveway. This man sitting across from me was a stranger wearing my husband's face. And if I wanted to survive him, I couldn't just be his wife anymore. I had to be better at this game than he was. I had to be the perfect actress. I picked up my fork and forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Tell me more about Chicago, I said. I want to hear every detail. I'm Bryn Hollings, 34 years old, and my career has been built on the ruthless exposure of financial lies, but now I am the one living the biggest lie of all. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:14 a.m. The red numbers stared back at me like unblinking eyes. Beside me, Julian snored. It wasn't a loud snore. It was a soft, rhythmic huff of air that used to lull me to sleep. Now it sounded like the countdown of a bomb. I lay perfectly still, my body rigid under the Egyptian cotton sheets. My muscles ached from the tension of holding a pose of relaxation for 4 hours straight. I counted his breaths. In, out, he was in REM sleep. His arm was draped heavy across my waist, a dead weight pinning me to the mattress. I had to move. I had to know. I slowly, agonizingly lifted his arm by the wrist. I moved it millimeter by millimeter. I felt like I was defusing a landmine. I slid out from under his grip and lowered his hand to the mattress. He stirred. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it would wake him. He grunted, rolled over, and buried his face in the pillow. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Silence returned to the room. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet finding the cold hardwood floor. I didn't grab a robe. I didn't want the extra noise of fabric rustling. I crept out of the bedroom, stepping only on the edges of the floorboards where the wood was nailed down tightest. I moved like a ghost in my own home. I navigated the hallway by memory, the darkness pressing against my eyes. I reached his home office. The door was ajar. I slipped inside and closed it softly, engaging the lock with a nearly silent click. I didn't turn on the overhead light. I couldn't risk the glow spilling under the door. I sat at his mahogany desk and opened the bottom drawer. I knew exactly where he kept his travel laptop. He told me it was for client confidentiality, a dedicated machine for sensitive mergers. I pulled out the slim, matte black device. I opened it. The screen flared to life, casting a ghostly blue pallor over my hands. Password prompt. I didn't have his password, but I didn't need it. I reached into the pocket of my pajama shorts and pulled out a USB drive. This was my weapon. It was a brute force decryption tool I used for forensic audits when uncooperative CFOs forgot their administrative credentials. I plugged it in. I booted from the drive. Lines of white code cascaded down the black screen, reflecting in my pupils, bypassing BIOS security. Mounting drive, decrypting file system. I tapped my fingers on the desk, the rhythm frantic. Come on, I whispered. Come on. The progress bar crawled 98%, 99%. Access granted. The desktop appeared. It was clean, suspiciously clean, no shortcuts, no clutter, just a single folder named System Logs. I opened it. Inside, nested within 3 layers of subfolders, I found the spreadsheets. They were labeled with dates, not names. I opened the most recent one, Oct 2023 Ops XLSX. My forensic brain took over. I stopped seeing a husband. I started seeing data. Columns A through F looked like standard shipping manifests. 8. Origin, destination, cost. But the weights were all between 150 and 220 pounds. The origins were residential addresses. The destinations were GPS coordinates. I opened a browser window in incognito mode. My hands were shaking so badly I mistyped the first coordinate. I corrected it. 47,128 degrees N, 74, 0060 degrees W, a remote stretch of marshland in the Jersey Pine Barrens. I cross-referenced the date on the spreadsheet row with news archives. My stomach dropped through the floor. That date matched the disappearance of Michael Vane, a whistleblower for a pharmaceutical company Julian represented. I tried another one, a coordinate in upstate New York. It matched the day a key witness in a racketeering case vanished while walking her dog. I scrolled to the column labeled disposal costs. $15,000, $25,000. There were line items for chemicals, transport, and contractor fees. I felt bile rise in my throat. Julian wasn't just defending criminals. He wasn't just laundering their money. He was the cleaner. He was the logistical genius who made the problems go away. I scrolled down to the bottom of the sheet. I needed to see how deep this went. There was a tab at the bottom I hadn't noticed. It was labeled pending. I clicked it. The screen refreshed. There was only one entry. It didn't have a date yet, it just had a status, active assessment. And under the target column there wasn't a name, there was a description. Subj, female, 30s, high financial literacy, potential exposure risk, critical. The air in the room suddenly felt very thin. I couldn't breathe, I clawed at my neck. High financial literacy, that was me. He wasn't planning a vacation for us. He wasn't taking me on the boat to reconnect. He was taking me to a location with no cell service to close out a liability. The disposal cost cell next to my description was blank. He hadn't priced me out yet. Or maybe, since I was his wife, the labor was free. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. My blood froze. I slammed the laptop shut. I yanked the USB drive out. I dove under the heavy oak desk, curling into a ball in the knee well, pressing my hands over my mouth to stifle the scream building in my chest. The doorknob turned. It jiggled. I watched the lock mechanism strain against the frame. Bryn! His voice was muffled by the wood. It was low, groggy. Bryn, are you in there? I squeezed my eyes shut. I was the architect's wife. And I was currently under audit. I'm Bryn Hollings, 34 years old, a forensic accountant accustomed to hunting down hidden assets in offshore accounts. But tonight I am hunting the man who swore to protect me. I waited exactly 3 minutes after Julian's taillights faded around the bend of our street. 3 minutes is an eternity when your heart is hammering against your ribs like a prisoner trying to break the bars. I grabbed the keys to my old sedan, the one we kept for emergencies, and backed out of the driveway. I didn't turn on my headlights. I let the moonlight guide me down the suburban asphalt. I knew where he was going. I had slipped an AirTag into the lining of his trunk 3 hours ago while pretending to look for the spare tire jack. My phone glowed on the passenger seat, a blue beacon in the dark cabin. The little dot representing my husband was moving east, toward the industrial district, toward the water. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My palms were slick with sweat. I wiped them on my jeans, one at a time, never taking my eyes off the road. The drive took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of spiraling terror. Every pair of headlights in my rearview mirror looked like an accomplice. Every shadow looked like a trap. The dot on the screen stopped moving. He was at the old shipyard, a graveyard of rusted metal and failed logistics companies. I killed the engine 2 blocks away. I let the car roll into an alleyway between 2 brick buildings that smelled of wet cardboard and urine. I sat there for a moment in the silence. The ticking of the cooling engine sounded like a countdown. I checked the glove box, a tire iron. It was heavy, cold, and utterly useless against a gun, but I grabbed it anyway. I slipped out of the car. The night air was thick with fog. It tasted like salt and diesel fuel. I stuck to the shadows, moving along the perimeter of a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. My breath hitched in my throat. I could see his car. It was parked next to a massive, corrugated metal warehouse. The building looked like a beast sleeping in the dark. There were no other cars around, just his sleek black SUV looking out of place amidst the decay. I crouched low. I moved through the tall, dry weeds that crunched softly under my sneakers. Please don't hear me. Please don't turn around. I reached the side of the warehouse. The metal wall was cold against my cheek. I could hear voices inside. They were muffled, distorted by the steel, but I recognized the cadence. One voice was smooth, baritone, familiar, Julian. The other voice was sharper. It clipped the ends of words. I crept toward a window about 6 feet off the ground. The glass was reinforced with wire mesh and coated in decades of grime. I found a rusted crate and dragged it over, wincing as it scraped against the concrete. I stepped up. I pressed my face near the glass, finding a small, clean spot where the grime had peeled away. My eyes adjusted to the dim yellow light inside. The warehouse was cavernous. Stacks of shipping pallets created a maze of shadows. In the center, under a single hanging bulb, stood 2 men. Julian was wearing his trench coat, his back slightly to me. His posture was rigid, tense. Facing him was a man I had never seen before. He was older, perhaps 50, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my first car. His hair was silver, slicked back, immobile. He looked like a shark that had learned to walk. He was holding a manila folder. He tapped it against his open palm. Tap, tap, tap. The timeline is accelerating, Julian, the man said. His voice carried clearly through the thin pane of glass. I need more time, Julian replied. His voice sounded strained, desperate. You've had 6 months, the man said. The auditors are getting close to the shell company in the Caymans. We need to cut the loose ends. She doesn't know anything, Julian said. My breath caught in my throat. Me, they were talking about me. The man in the suit sighed. It was a sound of disappointment, like a teacher dealing with a slow student. He opened the folder. He pulled out a photograph and held it up. My blood turned to absolute ice. It was my professional headshot, the one from the firm's website. I was smiling in the photo, wearing my navy blazer, looking confident and capable, looking alive. The man in the suit held it up to the light, inspecting it as if checking for defects. Your wife is asking too many questions at the firm, Julian, the man said. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden. She's just diligent, Julian argued, but his voice lacked conviction. That's why she's good at her job. It doesn't mean she suspects us. She requested the transaction logs for the Vane merger yesterday, the man said coldly. She accessed the secure archive using a partner's login. How did he know that? I had been so careful. I had used a VPN. I had scrubbed my digital footprints. She's curious, Julian said. I can handle her. The man laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Handle her, he mocked. Like you handled the situation in Chicago. You're getting sloppy, Julian. Sentimentality is a liability. He took a step closer to my husband. The client is unhappy. Julian flinched. I'll fix it, Julian said. You won't, the man said. We will. He slid the photo back into the folder and snapped it shut. Friday, the man said. The boat trip you planned. That's the window. My knees began to shake so violently I thought I would fall off the crate. Friday, 2 days from now. Make it look like an accident, the man continued. Drowning, alcohol involved, tragic. Julian looked down at his shoes. He didn't scream, he didn't fight, he didn't defend me, he just nodded. I understand, Julian whispered. I felt a piece of my soul wither and die right there on the crate. The man in the suit reached into his pocket and pulled out a small vial. Use this, he said. In her wine, it mimics cardiac arrest. She won't struggle in the water. Julian took the vial. He held it up to the light. The liquid inside was clear. Innocent, deadly. Friday, Julian repeated. Don't fail us again, the man said, or the next folder I open will have your daughter's picture in it. The world stopped spinning. My daughter, Lily. She was staying with my mother for the weekend. They knew about Lily. They knew everything. Panic, primal and electric, surged through my veins. I had to get out of here. I had to get to Lily. I stepped down from the crate. My foot landed on a loose piece of gravel. Crunch. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet night. Inside the warehouse, both men snapped their heads toward the window. What was that? The man in the suit hissed. Julian turned. He looked straight at the window, straight at me. I ducked. I pressed my back against the cold metal wall, my heart thundering so loud I was sure they could hear it through the steel. Check it, the man ordered. I heard the heavy screech of a metal door sliding open. Footsteps on the gravel, fast, coming toward me. I gripped the tire iron. I wasn't a forensic accountant anymore. I wasn't a wife. I was a mother with a target on her back, and I was done playing by the rules. I'm Bryn Hollings, 34 years old, a forensic accountant who just watched her husband sign her death warrant, and now I'm running for my life. The beam of a high-powered flashlight sliced through the fog above my head. I flattened myself into the dirt. The smell of wet earth and motor oil filled my nose. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Nothing, a voice called out. It was the man in the suit. Probably a raccoon, Julian replied. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I risked a single glance through the gaps in the dry weeds. They were standing in the open doorway of the warehouse now. The yellow light from inside spilled out, framing my husband in a silhouette that looked like a stranger. He wasn't looking for me. He wasn't scanning the perimeter with the panic of a man worried about his wife's safety. He was looking at the photo of me, the one the man had handed him. I watched, paralyzed, as Julian folded the glossy paper in half. He creased it with his thumb. He opened his trench coat. He tucked my smiling face into his breast pocket right next to his heart. He didn't do it with regret. He didn't hesitate. He did it with the clinical detachment of an undertaker closing a casket. He patted the pocket once. Then he turned back to the man in the suit and nodded. I'll handle the boat, Julian said. That was it. That was the end of our 10-year marriage. That was the end of the vows we whispered in a vineyard in Napa. He didn't defend me. He didn't beg for my life. He simply accepted the assignment. The heavy metal door began to slide shut again, screeching on its rusted tracks. I didn't wait for the latch to click. I moved. I scrambled backward on my hands and knees, crab walking away from the light. My sneaker slipped on a patch of loose stones. The gravel crunched beneath my feet like thunderclaps in the quiet night. I froze. But the door slammed shut with a final, echoing bang. They hadn't heard me. Or maybe they just didn't care anymore because my expiration date was already set. I turned and sprinted. I abandoned the tire iron in the tall grass. It was dead weight. I needed speed. I ran toward the alley where I'd left the sedan. My chest heaved. My throat tasted like copper. I reached the car and fumbled for the handle, my fingers slick with sweat and grime. I practically fell into the driver's seat. I locked the doors. My hands were shaking so violently I couldn't get the key into the ignition. Come on, Bryn, come on. I jammed the key in. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. I didn't turn on the headlights. I threw the car into reverse and peeled out of the alley, the tires squealing against the damp asphalt. I drove blindly for 3 blocks before I dared to flip the lights on. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I was afraid I'd see that black SUV behind me. I hit the on-ramp for the interstate and floored it. The speedometer climbed 70, 80, 90. The lane markers blurred into a single white line. I was hyperventilating. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached, trying to anchor myself to reality. But reality was fracturing around me. Friday. He was going to kill me on Friday. He was going to drug my wine and push me into the dark water of the lake. Why? To save himself. To keep his shell companies hidden. To protect a lie I hadn't even fully uncovered yet. And then, as the city lights blurred past my window, a thought hit me with the force of a physical blow. I gasped, swerving slightly into the shoulder before jerking the wheel back. The phone call, the call that started all of this, last Tuesday. Julian had been on a business trip. His phone had accidentally dialed mine. I had listened for 20 minutes as he discussed cleaning up the mess with an unknown man. I had recorded it. I had analyzed it. I had used that recording as the catalyst to dig into his files. But Julian is an architect. He is meticulous. He is a man who measures twice and cuts once. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't have accidents. The realization washed over me like ice water, chilling me to the bone. The phone call wasn't an accident. It was a test. They knew the auditors were getting close. They suspected a leak. They suspected me. But they needed proof of my curiosity before they could justify eliminating me. So they fed me a crumb. They staged the pocket dial to see if I would bite. If I had been the oblivious housewife they wanted, I would have hung up. I would have mentioned it over dinner with a laugh. Honey, you pocket dialed me today sounded boring. But I didn't. I stayed silent. I investigated. I accessed the secure archives. I downloaded the transaction logs. I walked right into the trap. My diligence was my death sentence. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel. Stupid, I screamed into the empty car. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I had thought I was the hunter. I had thought I was the one lurking in the shadows, gathering evidence. But I was just a mouse navigating a maze they had built for me. And now I had reached the center. I choked back a sob. Tears streamed down my face, hot and stinging. I couldn't go home. If I went home, he would know. He would see the dirt on my knees. He would see the terror in my eyes. But I couldn't run either, not yet. Lily, my daughter, was at my mother's house in Connecticut. The next folder I open will have your daughter's picture in it. The threat echoed in my ears, louder than the rushing wind outside. They knew where she was. If I disappeared tonight, if I went to the police, if I did anything unpredictable, they would hurt her. I had to play the game. I had to go back. I had to walk into that house, wash the dirt off my skin, and crawl into bed beside the man who was planning to murder me in 48 hours. I had to pretend I didn't know. I exited the highway. My speed dropped. My heart rate didn't. I turned onto our quiet, tree-lined street. The houses looked peaceful. Manicured lawns, porch lights, lies. I pulled into the driveway. I turned off the engine. I sat there in the dark, staring at the front door of my own home. It didn't look like a sanctuary anymore. It looked like a stage. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. My eyes were red. My skin was pale. I pinched my cheeks to bring back some color. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of stale coffee and fear. I opened the car door. I wasn't Bryn the forensic accountant anymore. I wasn't Bryn the wife. I was an actress in the performance of my life, and I had 2 days to rewrite the ending. I'm Bryn Hollings, 34 years old, a forensic accountant who thought she was the hunter, but I just walked through my own front door and realized I am nothing more than the prey. I sat in the driveway for a full minute after killing the engine. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my fingernails digging into the leather until I thought it might tear. I had to go in. I had to pretend. I had to wash the warehouse dirt off my knees, scrub the terror off my face, and walk into that house like a woman who hadn't just watched her husband plan her execution. Breathe, Bryn, just breathe. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. My eyes looked hollow like two burnt-out fuses, but I forced a smile. It was brittle, fake. It would have to do. I grabbed my purse and stepped out into the humid night air. The walk up the concrete path felt like wading through quicksand. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to turn around. Run, get back in the car, drive until the gas runs out. But I couldn't run, not with Lily at my mother's house. Not with Julian's threat about my daughter hanging over my head like a guillotine blade. I reached the front porch. My hand shook as I reached into my bag for my keys. The metal jangled, a harsh, discordant sound in the oppressive silence of the suburbs. I slid the key toward the lock. It didn't go in. I frowned, pushing harder. The door drifted inward with a soft, well-oiled creak. It was already unlocked. It was ajar. My stomach dropped through the floorboards. I always locked the door. Always. I froze on the welcome mat, the humid air suddenly feeling freezing cold against my damp skin. Julian, I called out. My voice was thin, trembling. There was no answer. Only the low, rhythmic hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I pushed the door open wider and stepped into the foyer. The house shouldn't have felt this way. It was my home. It was where I picked out paint swatches and arranged throw pillows. But tonight the air inside was heavy, charged. It smelled of his cologne, sandalwood, and expensive scotch, but thicker than usual, suffocating. The hallway lights were off, but a glow spilled from the living room, not the bright, welcoming lamps I usually turned on. It was the dimmer switch, turned all the way down to a soft, menacing amber. I walked toward it. My sneakers squeaked on the hardwood. I wanted to take them off to be silent, but I didn't dare bend down. I needed to be ready to run. I rounded the corner into the living room, my breath hitched in my throat. Julian was there. He wasn't at the warehouse. He wasn't on a boat. He was sitting in my favorite armchair, the velvet wingback by the fireplace. He was still wearing his trench coat, the collar turned up, damp from the night mist. He looked massive in the dim light, a shadow taking the shape of a man. He didn't look up when I entered. His attention was focused entirely on the object in his hands. He was turning it over and over, his movements slow, rhythmic, hypnotic. It was a phone, not his phone, not my regular iPhone. It was the cheap, prepaid burner phone I had bought 3 days ago. The one I had used to back up the audio recording of his accident call. The one I had hidden inside the hollowed-out spine of an old encyclopedia on the bookshelf. My knees buckled. I grabbed the doorframe to keep from collapsing. He found it. He knew. The game was over before I had even played my first move. Julian stopped spinning the phone. He gripped it tightly in his large, steady hand. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes were dark voids in the low light. He didn't look angry. There was no rage in his face, no contorted mask of fury. He looked disappointed. He looked like a teacher staring at a student who had failed a simple test despite being given all the answers. The silence stretched between us, tight as a piano wire. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He placed the phone gently on the side table. Click, then he spoke. "You should have just stayed in the car, Bryn." His voice was a whisper, but it carried through the empty room like a thunderclap. I stopped breathing. He knew I was at the warehouse. He had seen me, or maybe he had heard the gravel crunch after all. I tried to speak, but my throat was closed tight. I gave you an out, he said, his tone conversational, terrifyingly casual. I gave you the pocket dial. I gave you the breadcrumbs. I wanted to see if you were smart enough to let it go. He stood up. He rose from the chair with a fluid, predatory grace that made him seem 10 feet tall. But you couldn't help yourself, he continued, taking a step toward me. You had to dig, you had to record. I took a step back. My heel hit the wall of the hallway. I was trapped. Where is she? I whispered. It was the only thing that mattered. Where is Lily? Julian stopped. A small, sad smile touched his lips. It was the smile he used to give me when I burned dinner. Lily is safe, he said softly. For now. He reached into his pocket. I flinched, expecting a gun. He pulled out a handkerchief. He took another step, invading my personal space, looming over me. I could smell the metallic scent of the warehouse on him now. He reached out and gently, tenderly wiped a smudge of dirt from my cheek. My skin crawled at his touch. I wanted to scream. I wanted to vomit. You have a smudge, he murmured. He tucked the handkerchief back into his pocket. Go upstairs, Bryn, he commanded. His voice dropped an octave. Hard, final, pack a bag. Why? I choked out. Because we're going on a trip, he said, his eyes locking onto mine, stripping away every lie I had ever told him. And I'd hate for you to be unprepared for what comes next. He gestured toward the stairs. He wasn't asking. I looked at the front door. It was 10 feet away. I could run. But he would catch me, and if he didn't catch me, he would call the man in the suit. The next folder I open will have your daughter's picture in it. I looked at my husband. The man I had slept beside for 10 years. The man who was currently deciding the logistics of my death. I swallowed the scream rising in my throat. I nodded, once. I turned and walked toward the stairs, feeling his eyes burning into my back with every step. I was alive, for now. But as I climbed the steps to our bedroom, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't packing for a trip, I was packing for a war. I'm Bryn Hollings, 34 years old, a forensic accountant who spent a decade unraveling corporate fraud, but I never realized the most dangerous numbers were the ones hidden in my husband's private server. I didn't pack for a war. I packed for a hostage negotiation. I moved around the bedroom like a ghost, my movements jerky and mechanical. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet shelf. I threw in a sweater, jeans. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely work the zipper. I wasn't thinking about clothes. I was thinking about the time. I checked my watch. It had been 10 minutes since I walked in the door. 10 minutes since Julian told me we were going on a trip. He was downstairs waiting. He thought he had won. He thought finding the burner phone in the living room was checkmate. He thought I was just a scared wife, a forensic accountant who was good with spreadsheets but bad with survival. He forgot one thing. I don't just find mistakes, I plan for them. I reached into the back of my underwear drawer. My fingers brushed against the silk, searching. There, taped to the underside of the drawer runner, a small black USB drive. It was smaller than a stick of gum, but it weighed more than the house we lived in. It contained everything: the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the wire transfers to the consultants who specialized in making problems disappear. I didn't put it in the... I slid it into the waistband of my jeans, the cold metal pressing against my hip bone like a second heartbeat. I took a deep breath. I looked at myself in the vanity mirror. The fear was still there, swimming in my eyes, but something else was rising beneath it. Adrenaline, calculation. I wasn't the prey anymore. I zipped the bag. I walked out of the bedroom. The hallway was dark. The stairs creaked under my weight, announcing my descent. I reached the bottom landing. I turned toward the kitchen. Julian was leaning against the granite island. He had poured himself a drink. Amber liquid swirled in a crystal tumbler. He looked relaxed, too relaxed. He looked like a man who had already mentally spent the life insurance money. He set the glass down as I entered. "Ready?" he asked. His voice was smooth, devoid of the menace he had shown in the living room. He was back to being Julian the charming husband, Julian the monster. I dropped the duffel bag on the floor. Hit the tile with a heavy thud. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, sharp and clear. Julian's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. "Bryn," he sighed, picking up his glass again. "Don't make this difficult. The car is running. We have a long drive ahead of us." "I'm not going anywhere with you," I said. My voice shook, but my feet stayed planted. He laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You don't have a choice," he said, taking a step toward me. "I have the phone, Bryn. I have the recording." "You have nothing. You're hysterical and you're coming with me." He took another step. He was 10 feet away, then 8. "I didn't just record the call, Julian," I said softly. He stopped. He tilted his head, studying me like a specimen in a jar. "What are you talking about?" "The phone," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack them. "The phone was sloppy. You were right. It was an amateur move." I watched his face. Confusion flickered behind his eyes. "But I'm not an amateur," I continued. "I'm the best forensic accountant in the state. Did you really think I wouldn't look at the family server? Did you really think I wouldn't notice the encrypted partition?" The color drained from his face. It happened instantly. 1 second he was flushed with victory, the next he was ash gray. "You didn't have the password," he whispered. "I didn't need it," I lied. "I mirrored the drive 3 days ago." He lunged. It was a blur of motion. He closed the distance between us in a heartbeat, his hand reaching for my throat. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I pulled out the backup drive I'd hidden in my waistband, the one containing his entire digital ledger of crimes, and held it up like a holy relic. "Stop," I commanded. He froze inches from me. His hand was raised, his fingers curled into a claw. His breathing was ragged. His eyes were locked on the small black stick in my hand. "This is it," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Every transaction, every bribe, the payments to the hitman for your partner last year, it's all here." "Give it to me," he snarled. The charm was gone, the husband was gone. "If you touch me," I said, backing up until my hips hit the kitchen counter, "it goes public." "You can't do anything with that," he spat. "You're not leaving this house." "I don't have to leave," I said. "I set up a dead man's switch." He blinked. "What? A program?" I said, the lie tasting like copper in my mouth. "I uploaded the contents to a secure cloud server. It's set to auto-email the files to the district attorney, the FBI, and 3 major news outlets." I saw the calculation running behind his eyes. He was trying to figure out if I was bluffing. "I have to enter a 6-digit code into my phone every 60 minutes, I said. "If I miss a check-in, the email sends." I checked my watch again. "I have 42 minutes left." The silence that followed was deafening. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a jet engine. Julian lowered his hand slowly. His face transformed into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His lips pulled back from his teeth in a snarl that looked more animal than human. The veins in his neck bulged. His fists clenched at his sides, turning white. "You bitch," he whispered. "Sit down," I said. He didn't move. "Sit down," I screamed, my voice cracking. He stared at me. We stood there in our gourmet kitchen, surrounded by stainless steel appliances and marble countertops, 2 predators circling each other. The man I loved was gone. He had been replaced by a monster with my husband's eyes. But he wasn't looking at a victim anymore. He was looking at a threat. "Where is Lily?" I asked, my grip on the drive tightening until the edges dug into my palm. "Call your mother. Put her on speaker, now." Julian didn't reach for his phone. He just smiled. And this time the smile was terrifying. You think you're smart, Bryn, he said softly, stepping back and leaning against the island again. You think a timer saves you? He looked at the clock on the microwave. Let's see what happens when the time runs out. He wasn't scared, he was calling my bluff. And as I stood there, clutching the drive, I realized with a sickening jolt that I had just started a countdown I didn't know how to stop. I'm Bryn Hollings, 34 years old, a former forensic accountant who used to uncover corporate embezzlement for a living. But now I'm a ghost haunting a cheap motel room on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. I didn't blink. Julian stepped toward me. The air in the kitchen was so thick with tension it felt like breathing through wet wool. He reached for me. His fingers brushed the sleeve of my sweater. He wasn't expecting resistance. He was expecting the wife who organized charity galas. He was expecting the woman who cried during sad movies. He forgot I was the woman who had just stared into the abyss of his digital soul. My hand moved before my brain gave the command. I didn't reach for the USB drive. I reached for the heavy green glass bottle of olive oil sitting on the counter next to the stove. I gripped the neck. I swung it with every ounce of terror and rage boiling in my veins. The glass connected with the side of his head. The sound was sickening. A wet, dull thud followed by the high-pitched shatter of glass. Oil and blood sprayed across the white marble island. Julian didn't scream, he just crumbled. His eyes rolled back and he hit the floor like a sack of wet cement. I stood there, panting, my chest heaved. My hand was slick with oil. I looked down at him. Blood was pooling under his ear, mixing with the greenish gold liquid. I didn't check his pulse. I didn't call 911. I stepped over him. My boots left oily footprints on the pristine tile. I grabbed his car keys from the bowl by the fridge. I grabbed his wallet. I didn't look back. I ran to the garage. My hands shook so hard I dropped the keys twice before I managed to unlock the door of his sedan. I threw my duffel bag into the passenger seat. I reversed out of the driveway, the tires screeching against the asphalt, tearing through the suburban silence. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to put pavement between me and the monster bleeding out on my kitchen floor. I drove until the gas light came on. Then I drove 10 miles more. I abandoned the car in a long-term parking lot at a regional airport 3 hours away. I wiped the steering wheel. I wiped the door handles. I walked to the bus station, pulling my hood low over my face. I paid cash for a ticket west. That was 3 weeks ago. Now I live in a town that smells like salt spray and rotting kelp. The wind here never stops. It rattles the thin window pane of my efficiency apartment. I go by the name of Clara now. I dyed my blonde hair a harsh chemical black in the bathroom sink. I cut it short with nail scissors. When I look in the mirror, I don't recognize the woman staring back. She looks harder, older. Her eyes are hollowed out, dark circles bruising the skin beneath them. My bank account is empty because I can't touch it. Accessing my funds would be like sending up a flare. I live off the cash I took from Julian's wallet and the little bit I had squirreled away in the duffel bag. It's running low. I work nights washing dishes at a dive bar where the regulars are too drunk to notice my shaking hands. Every morning I walk to the public library. I sit at the computer terminal in the back corner. I search for news. I search for my name. Bryn Hollings, Julian Hollings, assault, disappearance. Nothing. That's the part that keeps me awake at night. There hasn't been a single news report, no police blotter, no missing persons alert. The silence is louder than a scream. If Julian were dead, it would be news. If he were in a coma, it would be news. The fact that there is nothing means only one thing: he cleaned it up. He woke up on that kitchen floor, wiped the blood and oil from his face, and made the problem disappear. Just like he made the money disappear. Just like he plans to make me disappear. I still have the USB drive. It hangs around my neck on a shoelace, tucked under my shirt, warming against my skin. It's my insurance policy. But it's also a target. I haven't sent the emails yet. I tried to trigger the dead man's switch manually at the library, but my hands froze over the keyboard. Fear paralyzed me. If I release the files, I destroy him. But if I release the files, I reveal myself. I have to come out of the shadows to testify. I have to trust the system. And after seeing what was on that drive, the payoffs to judges, the bribes to cops, I don't trust the system. I only trust the silence. I sat on the edge of my sagging mattress, staring at the burner phone I bought at a convenience store in Idaho. I've never given the number to anyone, not my mother, not my best friend, certainly not Julian. It sat on the nightstand, a small, plastic brick of silence. And then it lit up. Vibration buzzed against the cheap wood table like an angry hornet. My heart stopped. I stared at the screen. Unknown number, I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt. How could anyone have this number? I backed away from the nightstand until my back hit the peeling wallpaper. The phone kept buzzing. Rhythmically, insistently, I knew I shouldn't answer it. Answering confirms I'm here. Answering confirms I'm alive. But the curiosity was a physical pain. I reached out, my hand trembling violently. I picked it up. I didn't press accept. I just watched it ring until it went to voicemail. The screen went dark. I stood in the center of the room, shivering in the damp coastal air. A minute later, the notification chimed. One new voicemail. I brought the phone to my ear. I pressed play. There was a crackle of static. Then a sound that made my blood turn to ice. It wasn't a voice. It was a song. Someone was whistling, slowly, tunelessly. It was the melody Julian used to whistle while he shaved in the morning, the farmer in the dell. The whistling stopped. A voice, low and distorted, whispered 3 words before the line clicked dead. Found you, Bryn. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor, the battery cover popping off. I looked at the door. I had locked it. I had wedged a chair under the handle. But as I stared at the flimsy wood, I realized the truth. The war hadn't ended in the kitchen. The war had followed me here, and the silence was over.